Search for Truth 2, Lesson 4, Chart 4. A holy people separated unto God. Throughout the ages, God has diligently searched and longed for individuals who delighted to think and talk about Him. Malachi chapter 3, verses 16-17. Such choice people have always been His pride and joy. He treasures them as He would the rarest of gems. God found Abraham. Here was a man who believed everything God told him. God designed that Israel would be a holy people, teaching every other nation how to please the Lord. Hence, they became a model for others to emulate. The word holy means separated and set apart, splendid, beautiful, pure, uncontaminated. He wanted Israel's lifestyle to be totally opposite from the ungodly nation under Satan's dominion. God's chosen one should worship, live, act, talk, eat, and dress differently from them. Each segment of the law was a protection and a benefit. Teach children to worship one God. The underlying faith of Israel is summed up in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 and 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Moses commanded that every Israelites indelibly etch these words in the minds of their children. Deuteronomy 6, verses 7 through 9. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up, and when thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as a frontlets between thy eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house, and on thy gates. Tabernacle, place of worship. Another special mark of separation was Israel's place of worship. Because God desired to dwell among His people, He instructed that worship would be in a centralized tent structure. At this tabernacle, people would learn the means of approaching God and the manner in which He would manifest Himself to them. An in-depth study reveals it to be the foreshadow of God's plan of redemption through Jesus Christ. Priests offer sacrifices and interpret law. Before Moses' day, the head of each family and the firstborn son exercised both spiritual and political forms of government. The Levites became the chosen ones to serve Israel's invisible king in the tabernacle. Among the priests, many sacred duties were teaching statutes of the Lord and acting as judges of the law. Their support came through a system called tithing, meaning 1/10. Each Israelite tithed their produce and cattle. 1/10 of the Levites' tithe was given to the priests for their support. Sacrificial offerings. When the tabernacle was introduced, the sacrificial offering became regulated. All sacrifices were to be offered on the brazen altar in the court of the tabernacle. Two types of sacrifices were offered: those without blood and those with blood. Bloodless sacrifices were first fruits and tithes, meat and drink offerings, and incense. Every Israelite presented tithes to the Levites and priests in gratitude to Yahweh. These consisted of grain, fruit, grapes, wool, meal, oil, or new wine. Blood sacrifices were of domestic animals or clean birds. 4 types of blood sacrifices were offered. Sin offerings atoned for ignorantly sinned against God and man. Trespass offerings were offered for some specific act of violating the law through error. Burnt offerings were self-dedication to God. And peace offerings, these offerings signified communing with God and included fellowship and friendship. The entire system of sacrifices and offerings symbolized the day when men would present themselves as a living sacrifice unto God. See Romans 12:1. And would offer the sacrifice of praise to God with his lips. Hebrews 13:15. The Sabbath, a Jewish day of rest and joy. The seventh day of the week was established as a day of rest and delight to bless and refresh man. Neither man nor beast could perform any work on this day. Special feast days. Every male Jew was required to attend 3 festivals each year: the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, or Booths. Each symbolized some unique historical event. 2 other feast days were the Feast of Trumpets, announcing the beginning of the civil Jewish New Year, and the Day of Atonement. A blood sacrifice was offered by the high priest for the sins of the people. Besides these 5 feast days, every 7th year was declared a sabbatical year. The fields were not planted. Every 50th year was the year of Jubilee, during which all property reverted to the original owner. Moral laws. These laws describe right conduct for God's people, proper treatment of other people, honest principles of life, how to be sexually virtuous, restrictions for choosing marriage partners, sexual rights in marriage, responsibilities and treatment of husbands and wives, divorce and remarriage, and God's judgment of homosexuality, sexual perversion, idolatry, and witchcraft. 9 of the 10 commandments are moral laws. In the book of Deuteronomy are such abominations: graven images, chapter 7, verse 25. Human sacrifices, chapter 12, verse 31. A defective animal sacrifice, chapter 17, verse 1. Witchcraft and spiritualism, chapter 18, verses 10 through 12. Religious prostitution, chapter 23, verse 18. Remarrying a defiled woman, chapter 24, verse 4. Interchange of apparel between sexes, Deuteronomy 22 and 5. Other abominations towards God are pride, lying, murder, sowing discord, and a froward heart, Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19, Proverbs 11 and 20, and Proverbs 12:22. Dietary laws. They were to observe which meats should be avoided. Any animal that divides the hoof and chews the cud may be eaten, such as a cow, sheep, oxen, and deer. But those that chew the cud with undivided hoof, such as a camel, horse, or rabbit, shall not be eaten. Because the pig divides the hoof, but does not chew the cud, its flesh is also unclean. All seafood with fins and scales may be eaten, but shellfish, shrimp, lobster, crab, and oysters are unclean. God's dietary law also specified that neither fat nor blood were to be eaten. Leviticus 3:17. The blood also assimilates whatever is in the stomach, whether nutritious or poisonous, and distributes it to the various parts of the body. Therefore, diseased germs are first carried in the bloodstream before affecting the flesh of an animal. What was the purpose of the Jewish dietary laws? Deuteronomy 5:33 says that ye may live and that may be well with you, and ye may prolong your days. Customs and ceremonies. Incorporated into the personal lives and habits of the people were religious overtones. Hygienic rules and regulations were given for purification of women, washing of hands, detecting and treatment of diseases, and uncleanness in general.